Welcome to the JusMusic Podcast. I'm your host, Jalen.
And I'm your other host, Marco.
And this is episode 54. 54, right?
Yeah, 54. That's right. Wow. That's right.
Fantastic, man. Again, thank y'all for tuning in to our episode. We really appreciate it. Today, this episode is very, very special. This is a very, very special episode for the podcast because this guest that we have is it's such an honor to have him on. For the last 9 years, he was voted the best blog in Charleston, along with his Twitter feed has been voted as the best in Charleston. And this year, actually, he won best local website and best local podcast. This is Christian Senger behind Holy City Center. Thank you so much for coming on, man. How are you?
I'm good, Jalen and Marco. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm doing well today. How about you guys?
Doing
great.
Doing good, man. Did I get that introduction right? Because I wanted to make sure I did that correct.
Yeah.
Awesome. You
got it.
Awesome, man. Well, first off, I guess let's just get into like how we met. So I think it was earlier this year, back when the Best of Charleston voting was released, and everybody was voting for like best performing arts center, best restaurant, best bar, yada yada yada. And we saw. So it's funny how it happened because we saw your list of like the best podcasts in Charleston, and we saw Apple Juice for Two, and I was like, we know those guys. They've been on our show, and we think they're awesome. We love them, and I was like, they got on Holy City Center's list of best podcasts, and I was like, let me go email this guy and tell him like, hey man, like check out our podcast. But I didn't think that you would put us on your list. I was like, I just want to reach out to him so he knows that we exist. And you put us on your list, and that was just an honor. Like, we really appreciated that because you didn't have to do that. Like, that was super, super dope and super awesome. And then I told Marco, he was like, what, bro? You got Holy City Center? And
because I heard of you before, and I was like, wow, Jalen, okay, all right.
Yeah,
I was happy to add you guys to that. I mean, that's the whole point of that list, is whether it's talking about Charleston or just Charleston based, I like to get everybody on there, and hopefully people will discover something new,
Right. And then so then I just had the idea. I was like, hey, like should we invite him on the podcast, man, just to see what he says? And Marco was like, yeah, why not? And I think either I DM'd you on Instagram or I sent you an email, one of the two, and here we are. So it's really cool that you're coming on the podcast. This is a little surreal. I'm not even gonna lie.
Man, I'm happy to. I promise you, the site, thankfully does well, but I promise you, I'm not that big of a deal. But I appreciate you guys with saying those nice words. It's very kind of you. And you DM me, and I was like, all right, yeah, this is a Charleston podcast. Seems like two good guys. I liked what you were doing to me. You talk about all sorts of stuff, but local stuff too. And you've had local interviews. I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is what I want to do with the site, and everything I do with it is just, being involved in all things Charleston. And yeah, so it seemed like a good fit. Yeah. Happy to be on. And thanks again for asking me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So first question is, what was the inspiration behind Holy City Center? Like, what made you want to create that?
So I'm not from here originally. I'm from Connecticut, and I moved down here a little bit after college, and just felt first I was visiting friends who had moved from college that have moved here first, and just fell in love with Charleston. The typical transplant story. And I was young and decided that this is a time in my life where I could do something kind of drastic, and I hadn't lived anywhere besides Connecticut, and had some friends here, so I knew I had a base of people that I could hang out with, so I wouldn't be completely alone. So I said, what the hell, I'll do it. And ended up moving here, and it was just like not a culture shock, but just like so many things to do, and so many things to learn about in the Charleston area. And after a few years of living here, I was like, wow, there's these really big events that are so cool. But now that I've been here a little while, I'm starting to learn about, the stuff that you don't always see, like in the newspaper or on TV or whatever. And I thought, what the heck, why don't I start documenting what I'm doing and what I like in town? And it was kind of like for people like me who had moved here, or maybe people who, grew up here but didn't really, maybe they took it for granted. They didn't realize how many fun things there were to do. And also for my friends back home to be like, hey, this is all the cool things I'm doing. Come visit me. And so that's kind of how it started. It was just like a blog. Like, here's what I'm doing. This is what, I love this event. I love this thing. But then, after a little while, it kind of morphed into less about what I was doing and more about like just what's happening in town. And, so it kind of grew from there. But that's how it started. It was just me wanting to talk about all these things that I thought were really cool that I enjoyed doing and thought others might be interested. And, it's changed a little bit since then. But yeah, that's how it got started.
Nice. And I wasn't crying. There was just something in my eye, like literally, like my eye was, like this whole time I'm listening to you, I'm like, bro, my eye is like on fire. So
hey, look, I get it. It's a moving story. I understand.
Yeah. But no, that's really cool how like basically you just you have your blog and you have a passion for trying new things, seeing new things, and it sounds like you like to learn about a lot. So it was just like, hey, why not just maximize this? This is something I like to do. This is something I love to do. So why not maximize the most of it, put it on the biggest flat platform that I can put it on. So I think that's really, really cool. Marco will tell you that's kind of how we started this podcast. It was just, I'm gonna let him tell it because he
well, I mean, it's a pretty simple story. It's nothing crazy, but it was just the end of the 2020 crazy year we had there. And I had just been watching a lot of podcasts, and I asked Jalen, I was like, we should start a podcast. I know most people always say that, but because we both are artists and musicians, and we always are talking about music and having all these different music debates, and just the stuff we were talking about just seemed really interesting. And I figured, maybe other people would be interested in listening to our takes. And so I brought the idea up to him, and he was like, do you even know how to start a podcast? And I was like, I have no idea, but we'll figure it out as we go along. So here we are now, and it's just been awesome. We got to talk with so many interesting artists and all sorts of awesome individuals. And, we're just going on strong. So
very cool. Yeah, and that's the best way to do things. I mean, just based on what I've seen from my own site and from like friends who started their own businesses or nonprofits or whatever, it's just if you are enjoying it and you find it entertaining, chances are there's someone somewhere that will. And maybe it won't be a huge audience, so like I knew that my website, for instance, is going to be kind of capped by the Charleston area. Like, sure, some people from out of the state will check it out when they're going to come visit it, but it's not going to be, I knew there's a limit to how big it could be. But, if I was enjoying it and sharing it, I knew there'd be an audience. And, I'm sure you're finding the same with your podcast. Like, you guys are having fun. Chances are people are going to have fun listening to it too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think ever since COVID, more and more people are really starting to figure out, their level of creativity. Because during COVID, like a lot of people were starting new things, whether it be a podcast, starting their own business, opening a restaurant, or finally starting to just learn new things, like learn how to cook, learn how to, make clothes, just do different things. And, the time that we were living in back in 2020, it kind of forced you to really look inside yourself and say, hey, I'm so used to doing things how they were, like everything's just so fast paced. There's just a routine to everything, but it's like, now I'm just stuck in the house. So like, I might as well learn how to do something new. So, and that's kind of what happened with this podcast. We knew that we both love to talk about music. We make music. I'm a musician, Marco's a DJ, and it's like, well, why not try this? And ever since then, I can't even lie, I really enjoy this podcast. And you have a podcast as well called Holy City Center Radio. I was listening to some of it today. I was listening to your newest episode And I listened to your first one as well. Very, very, very good stuff. Very good stuff.
Thank
I like
you.
how you kind of segue into the different things, and you're not afraid to talk about the rough, the hard topics, the things that that are just hard to talk about. Specifically, things dealing with politics and discrimination, various other topics. So I definitely commend you for that. So I guess, like, what was then the inspiration behind the podcast?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the kind words again. I appreciate it. Kind of what you guys were talking about, the pandemic started, obviously I'd had this site for years, and I always toyed with the idea of a podcast, but I was just always busy, doing other things. And how life was pre-pandemic, you're in your groove. And then pandemic hits and I'm finding myself with all this free time all of a sudden. And so I kind of looked into it some more and reached out to, at the time, just an acquaintance of mine who I knew was producing podcasts in town, and I asked if she, she had availability. And, so she does most of the legwork. Lindsay Collins is her name. She runs LMC Sound System is the name of her company. And then she has a local podcast too called FMB Radio, which is about food and bev. And so she does all the she brings her equipment here, or wherever we go, and records it and edits it. She does all the hard work, but I wouldn't have even found her or thought of it if it wasn't for the pandemic. So if there was one good thing that came out of it for me, it was that I was able to start it. And I've always wanted to do it because radio, when I was growing up, radio and in college too, were like my favorite thing. I thought DJs were so cool when I was little, and when I got to college, I worked for the student radio station, and that was my favorite out of all the media stuff. And I liked to talk about current events and topics. So I thought it was a good extension of the site where, I could give some more background, some more context, and, my opinion sometimes on things, and then also interview some people. I prefer hearing interviews versus reading them. I just feel like you get a better sense of the person, because you can hear their tone and the way they're answering versus just reading it. So I just thought that'd be a good idea, and decided to go for it, and thankfully got some good feedback. And also it's not that I shied away from politics or controversial topics as far as my opinion on like Twitter and stuff, but I've been more open to doing it, because I think a lot of people are, with 2020. I think with the the murder of George Floyd and protests that came out of that, and just everything that's happened really over the last few years, it just felt like, all right, I've got this platform, and I want to talk about fun stuff and what's cool and exciting in town, but there's important things, and we need to discuss those too. And I feel like I know I love Charleston, but I feel like it could be even better. And there's a lot of people here who agree with me on that. They might have different ideas of what will make it better, but so I thought, hey, let's talk about this stuff. Let's get conversations going. And I saw other people doing it in town that I respect, and thought, hey, what the heck? Maybe I could have some of them on my podcast and keep that conversation going. So it's been great. Thankfully people have been pretty willing to come on and chat, and if they, most don't mind talking about that stuff too, if it's something we need to dive into. So it's been really good. But it was a pandemic thing, and then it just like the website, it kind of just evolved from there. And even though things are, I don't have as much free time as I did 2 years ago, I'm in a kind of a nice groove where I can fit that into my weekly schedule.
Yeah, Marco, I had a question that kind of relates to you. I had a question for Christian that relates to you. You said how you were, you have a lot of, there's DJs that you used to listen to all the time growing up, and how you used to, when you were in college, you worked for your, worked with your radio station at your college radio station. That is actually something that we started doing when we got to college. Yeah, we had our own radio show, and we just played music on there. I had my own show, Marco had his own show, and then we combined forces. And so like the radio station at College of Charleston was pretty much like the precursor to the podcast. But I wanted to hear your take on DJs as far as DJs in Charleston. Do you talk about a lot of the DJs in Charleston? Have you seen any DJs in Charleston? I'm asking this because Marco's a DJ.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, I will, anytime there's an event that involves live music, whether it's a band, a DJ, one person and a guitar, whatever it is, I'll include their name and things like that in there. I don't do a lot of like music reviews or anything like that. It's more just like, here's what's happening. And if I do like someone, I might say it on Twitter or whatever. But yeah. So I've talked about DJs before. I've seen some around town, whether it was on purpose, like going to an event that someone was going to be at, or, just happened to go to a bar and someone was there. So I have, now I don't go out as much as I used to when I first started the website. So I'm not, seeing DJs as much as I, did when I was going out, on Fridays and Saturday nights consistently. But yeah, I'll still see some around town.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, he's giving off the vibe that he's more of a homebody.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But I actually have a question. So the name Holy City Sinner, how'd you come up with that? Because I think that's a pretty cool name for a blog, and it seems to be very easy to remember.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was the goal. I wanted a name that would get people's attention, and like you said, would be easy enough to remember. Because that's the whole thing with whatever you're starting. You want people to remember it. So the easier you can make it on them, the better. But I knew I wanted it to involve Holy City. I thought that is such a cool nickname for a city. And even though, it's a lot of people associate it with the churches and things that are around town, I thought it's still kind of fun. Like, my city's the holy city, like it's like it's like the Mecca. It's where you want to go. It's the place. So I kind of had that in my mind too. And then I thought about, what could I add to it? Like Holy City Gazette. Like I was trying to think of something. I'm like, no, I don't really like that. I don't want to make it like a newspaper type name. And at some point, just the idea of like devil popped in my head, like Holy City Devil. And I was like, that's a little too much. And then finally I thought of Sinner, and I was like, does that work? Holy City Sinner? And asked a couple friends, like, I think I'm going to call this website, this blog at the time that I'm working on, I think I'm going to call Holy City Sinner. And they said it was good. And I wasn't sure at first, I was still relatively new in the city. And I'm like, I don't know, are people going to be like, what is this? A sinner? Like, but thankfully people like yourself, they get it. They see that it's like, oh, okay, it's just like a fun name, and it's easy to remember, and it's not like this weird like cult guy or something. And so I thankfully it popped into my head, and it was the one I went with. And thanks to some feedback from a couple friends, and thankfully pretty much everybody gets it and seems to like it. So it worked out really well.
Nice. So we got the inspiration behind the blog, the podcast, how you came up with the name. So I want to pick your brain more about like your taste in music and your opinion on music, because this is just music. So everybody that comes on, we got to talk about the music. So as far as let me ask. So who are some artists that you just have in rotation, like all the time?
You talk at any or local only? You mean?
It doesn't matter. Both. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Either one.
So this is my favorite band is Polarizing. It's either people are like, "Yep, me too, I get it," or they're like, "I hate that band and I hate their fans." But my favorite band is the Dave Matthews Band. I've been seeing them since I was in high school, and just saw them recently here in town, and I just love the whole culture around the band. Not so much back in the late 90s and early 2000s when it was a lot of fratty bros that would go to shows, which I was not one of, but the good fans, the ones that they have this like really cool community where they always allowed taping of their shows back when they started, and they just kept letting people tape their shows. So you can go online, and number one, you can see like their set lists, which change every show. They're kind of like Fish or other jam bands like that, where you can see set lists back when they started, and you can download just about any show that they have ever played for free. And when I was younger, it was a little different than that. You could, I knew them before I had internet, and then once I got the internet, that's when it became more. I'm like, oh my god, this band does this. And so anyway, I just really dug that. And some people I tell, and they're just like, oh, that band, because I think a lot of people associate them with that early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s. Like I said, that the crowds weren't always the best, but they've gotten a little better. So yeah, that's my favorite band. And I've kind of gotten stuck these days listening to the bands that I liked when I was younger. So like that same time frame. So like I always like Third Eye Blind. I used to listen to a lot of like late 90s. I was really into rap. So like Method Man, Redman, DMX, Biggie. I'm trying to remember what else I listened to back then. Def Squad, Busta Rhymes, like just all those like late 90s, like those big names I was super into, Beastie Boys. So I'll have like a 90s, like late 90s rap playlist that I go through a lot to kind of mix it up. And then I like a lot of one-off classic songs as well. I'm a big fan of just rock music in general, but I'll have everything from Elton John and Bob Marley and Pearl Jam and just like anything. I'll listen to just about anything. But as far as like new music, it's very rare that I discover a new band like I used to when I was younger. But a few will pop in here and there and I'll listen to. And as far as local, I think Doom Flamingo is like maybe the best band here. I haven't heard everybody, of course, but I just love what they're doing. What were you saying?
I didn't mean to cut you off. Doom Flamingo with Mike Quinn.
Yep.
Tamika Moore. Yeah.
Yep. And a couple Ross Bogan, and I'm forgetting Thomas, and of course Ryan Stasek, who plays in a band called Humphreys McGee, who's like a jam band type band as well, kind of similar to what I was talking about before. And they're just great. Like they do like a whole production, and they just play like this cool, like almost like 80s sounding synth music sometimes. And I just like their whole vibe. I think they're pretty great. So I listen to them a lot. And then I have some friends who play music in town that run the gamut, from someone like my friend Emily Curtis, who does kind of like pop music, but she plays her guitar, and Lauren Hall, who's a country artist. They're just hard workers. As someone you had on your podcast recently, LaFay is really great.
She's awesome.
Sandrina Dunning. There's so many.
Yeah, there's a lot that I want to touch on from that. But Marco, sure. I feel like you had a question, or I feel like you were going to say something.
Yeah, this is so I was just going to ask. So there are lots of different venues in Charleston, and I was just kind of curious, like, what's your favorite music venue that you love going to in Charleston?
Probably, it depends on the show, I think, but I love the music hall. I love what Charles Carmody has done with that over the last, it might even be close to 10 years now.
Yeah, I think it is just getting close.
Yeah. There was like nothing that happened there. There'd be like one show a year basically, and he took it over, and it's just like constantly shows, and they're doing fun stuff there too. Like they'll play movies, and they've done like dance parties and the whole thing. And they recently took out, they have the ability to take out a certain amount of rows from the front, so now they can have like a pit basically that they never had. So I think that just makes it a little better. It's a decent sized venue, but it's small enough that no matter where you sit, you can see really well. And the sound in there is just amazing. Like, I think it's probably the best sound in town. So I like that. The Music Farm, which Charles and the Music Hall people just took over, is great. I've been there a couple times now since they reopened. Sound in there is much better. They got AC in there now. But yeah, I think my Music Hall is tops, just because they've been doing it for a while now, and they pull a nice range of shows in a nice variety. But I think Music Farm's going to be really cool too. They're starting to get going with their lineup as well.
Yeah, I think Charleston Music Hall, really good venue.
Definitely.
And Charles is his name? Charles?
Yeah, Charles.
He actually, because Marco and I graduated from college in Charleston, and he came to one of our arts management classes.